Boa noite. Estou muito contente de estarmos diante das oportunidades de ouvir conversar com Walter Miolo, cujo nome já é uma apresentação em si. Seu maior mérito não está na sua formação ou posição acadêmica, que ele transcende em muito com a sensibilidade, criatividade e impacto das suas ideias decoloniais, que não deixam pedra sobre pedra na nossa mente e nos nossos sentidos, que nos dão palavras e formas de pensar, que tiram da invisibilidade nossa experiência subalterna e que fazem aparecer formas de viver sistematicamente silenciadas, ao ponto de não aparecerem como opções válidas, mesmo num mundo que precisa urgentemente de alternativas. Nesse sentido, ele vai tratar hoje de assuntos que alcançam o interesse geral de quem está vivendo o mundo atual em transe, sem deixar de tocar em temas de interesse específico para a área das relações internacionais, como expresso no título da conversa de hoje, The Change of Epoch, No Longer an Epoch of Changes, and the Turmoil in the Interstate Order. Com vocês, então, o grande pensador Walter Miolo. The floor is yours, Professor.
Well, thank you very much. I cannot speak Portuguese. I can understand when people speak slowly. I asked Fabio, and he said in English will be better. So thank you for the invitation, and thank you, all of you, for sitting here to listen what I have to say. Uh, so yes, the title is the idea that I want to convey is that we are all in the planet are living a change of epoch, not an epoch of, no longer an epoch of changes, and I will explain this. What does it mean? Because I mean, even the president of Argentina is talking about a change of epoch, and that's fine. But what do we mean by that? So that's my talk is about that. So I will work with a PowerPoint. So there are concepts and things like that that will be helpful. I don't like PowerPoint, uh, but sometimes, well, it's useful. It's like English. I don't like English, but it's useful. It's not my language either. So let me share the PowerPoint if I can figure out how to do it. Can you see it?
Yeah, we can just see. Yeah, now it's coming in.
Yeah, because
Yes.
I had to put it down because I couldn't manage the screen. So now it's good, right?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay. It is a change of epoch, not an epoch of change. So I have an introduction and two parts. So you will see there will be in a slide saying part one and part two, but I will start with the introduction. So the idea of una época de cambios, no una cambio de época, the idea of a change of epoch comes from José de Sousa Silvas, who is one of your people, right? He's a ingeniero agrónomo. He's an activist. He works in the north of Brazil. I'm friend with him. I met him in 2000 when he was kind of talking about an epoch of change, a change of epoch. What did he mean by a change of epoch? He was working with the idea of Alvin Toffler and and Castells, so the network society. So Jose is a very good article. I mean, I am not trying to correct him. I'm trying to kind of provide a different interpretation. So for him, the change of epoch was related to the Industrial Revolution. So in the 2000, Castell and Toffler, they were kind of paying attention to the technological revolution that by the 90s was already all over. So Jose saw the technological revolution as a change of epoch. Uh, when I heard him saying that, I like the idea, the change of epoch, but my sense, my feeling was different. I didn't see the change of epoch in the way he was. I understood he was trying to say, but didn't correspond with my sense of what the change of epoch that we were living in the 2000s. And that is because I was already working with Quijano and the colonial metric of power. So looking at things from the colonial metric of power, that for you who are not familiar, I will say more in the first part. So through through the years, that idea kept on dancing on my head and began to take shape. How can we understand the change of epoch? Thinking not from the history of industrial revolution to technology, but thinking from the history of the colonial metric of power. So the colonial metric of power, to say something very quickly and then more in detail, is something that you don't see. It's like the unconscious. You don't see the unconscious. I hear that there are psychoanalysts in the room. So you hear the narrative of the people being analyzed, but you don't see the unconscious. So you don't see the colonial metric of power. The colonial metric of power, metaphorically, is the unconscious of Western civilization. So now we go into the change of, the first part of the change of epoch. I have no idea how to, there, okay. Okay, there's a lot of funny things here that appear in the screen. In my screen, I don't know if it appears in yours. Okay, let's start with the Colonial Revolution. This is in 1500. There was really a change of epoch, and from the perspective of the colonial metric of power, we call that the Colonial Revolution. What happened before was a very different world order. The world order we are living in today began to take shape in the 16th century. There was a lot of things that already existed, like slavery, for example. But in the 16th century, there was a radical transformation. It was massive. Was a massive exploitation of labor because of the massive expropriation and appropriation of land in the Americas. So nothing like that. It was a slavery, but not a slavery at that scale, not a slavery at the scale of the majority, the 95%, 98% African human being captive and then enslaved. So that's one of the radical changes of the colonial revolution in 1500. There are others, but just to give you an example. So there are two narratives beyond that kind of see that radical change that I call the colonial revolution. One of the narratives is a European narrative. And it's a narrative provided by Carl Schmitt. in a book that is called The Second Nomos of the Earth, that you can find in the web. So what was Schmidt's idea to say that in the 1500s a second nomos of the earth began to take shape? So he was a legal scholar and a legal historian scholar, and he basically formulated the idea of the second nomos of the earth in international relations. That's why people in international relations should be interested with that. So he, in the book, he traces the kind of the beginning, the origin, so to speak, of international, the international law and international relation, because until that moment was no international law, didn't exist. There were law, like it was kind of slavery existed in, I mean, in Europe, in Greece, etc. The law, but they were kind of the divine law, the human law that existed in the Roman Empire, and of course, everybody in the 16th century knew that. But Schmidt saw that the kind of the, I mean, he understood the meaning of this of Salamanca, of Vitoria, Vitoria, and then Suarez, and all the kind of the Iberian, and then Grotius, kind of initiating this international law, which was basically a justification to expropriate and appropriate land. That's what kind of international law. And that has to do, Schmidt doesn't talk about that, but that has to do also with a kind of significant change of the concept of the human, which is a Renaissance concept. But that concept of the human began to be taken as the model to judge and rank other human beings. So in the Atlantic, the target of this classification were African and indigenous people. So they were lesser human. And because they were lesser human, they had to be civilized, they had to be converted to Christianity. And as Victoria said, there are like women, the Indians are like women and children. They don't know how to govern themselves. So you see how the second nomos of the earth, the kind of the law and the question of humanity, that is basically what I understand today as racism and sexism, because that's what racism is, to make people inferior for some kind of reason that is related to their body or their language or their country or their religion, and also make people inferior or abnormal because of their sexuality or what kind of gender, not just feminine, but also the LGTB, etc. All those are kind of classification that they're deficient in relation to the Renaissance European concept of the human. So that is basically the idea of the second nomos of the earth. So what was the first nomos? What was the difference? So the main difference is that, you know, nomos in Greek means law, but not law necessarily as we understand it today, but a kind of regulation. I mean, to live in a community, you need some kind of organization. So that's what kind of nomos. You know, the basic unit of a Greek society was the oikos, kind of the extended family, not the Christian family, but the extended families, not the oikos, living together, share the land, etc. And an economy comes from oikonomos, oikonomy. So nomos there is a kind of the regulation, no, of the economy. So what reading Smith, you began to realize, I mean, there is a lot to say about his concept of the first nomos. I have a lot of difficulties in accepting the way he put it, but I will make a summary. I will say that during the first nomos, there were a lot of nomos. So the first nomos is a polycentric world order. They were not one center. There were many centers. There were many nomos. And you can say, well, there were China, and there were kind of Persia, and there were African kingdom, and the Mayas, and the Aztec, etc., etc. Each kind of organization has a nomos. But the difference with the second nomos is that no one at that point, there was no one nomos or one civilization that impinge, control, disrupt, interrupt other civilizations. So the second nomos of the earth is the first time in this in the history of humanity that not only interrupt, because of course the Mongol was kind of coming here and Rome was, but there was no one nomos or one civilization that persistently began to build itself and interfere with the rest of the nomos, or what we call today also civilization. So, the first nomos of the earth, polycentric, become unicentric. So Rome began to be the center of that, and then later on the Greenwich Meridian, and then United States, etc., etc. But the distinctive feature of the second nomos is one civilization that presents itself as the present of time and the center of space, that has the right to kind of tell other civilization what to do. And international law, says Smith, that was the function. And he said very clearly, international law was Eurocentered. And he doesn't say that as a critique. Eurocenter is a descriptive term. Eurocenter means that international law was created to the benefit and interest of Europe. That is that simple. So he said the second nomos lasted from 1500 to 19, well, I would say 1918, I think, the end of World War I. And then he kind of silenced what happened between 1918 and 1950, let's say, because this book was written in the 50s. And we were already in the Cold War. And he said, well, what we have to start thinking about now is the new nomos. That edition of the book was about 1970, in the middle of the Cold War. He didn't know what is going to happen, but he was kind of anticipating 3 scenarios, and those are the new nomos. The first scenario is that one of the 2 main contenders, US or the Soviet Union, will be the winner and will be the next world leader. The second scenario, possible scenario, is that after this is resolved, the United States and England kind of, and the UK, kind of will get together, because there is a kind of obvious connection between the British imperialism and then United States imperialism, but it's a kind of imperialism without colonies. But I mean, it's the same kind of configuration. Right? United States comes from England, doesn't come from France or from Spain, right? So that was the possible scenario, is that, well, the English kind of imperial tradition will take over. And the third scenario is the most interesting, because something we are looking today, which is, well, probably there will be a gross bound, that will be regional kind of organization. And we are kind of seeing that emerging, right? In Asia, the kind of the Asian organization, but also the kind of the China, Russia, but also the Latin American Mercosur. Um, there are kind of uh, indications, signs that we will have more and more that kind of regional organization. The BRICS was the most important one because the BRICS was not regional but was intercontinental. The BRICS was kind of Russia, China, uh, India, Brazil, and South Africa. So that is for me the most telling growth one. What well, that in Schmidt, that was a kind of a linear history. So one of the three possibilities, and will be the next. People will say today post. So that is the way people think in the previous epoch, when there were epoch of changes. But now there is an explosion. There is no transition anymore. We cannot say that there will be transition to one kind of a scenario. The scenario coexist. So thinking the world in coexistence is one of the most necessary feature to think about the change of epoch. Don't think that China will be the next United States. That is a way of modern linear post thinking. No, will be another scenario, and I will tell you in a minute. So now I want to just tell you the narrative from the perspective of Aníbal Quijano. He didn't wrote the narrative I am going to tell you, but this is what I did, starting from Quijano. So this first part is the modern colonial cycle of Eurocentricity, the consolidation of the idea of Western civilization and the westernization of the planet, right? So we go back to 1500 and then began to the westernization. It was not just that Spain and Portugal kind of conquest and colonize the American continent. No, that was the foundation for everything that comes after. The French and the Dutch and the British and United States. Everything has been established here. It was not just, again, like the Mongol kind of invading China, that was once. But this was not just once. That's why we call it the Colonial Revolution. That was the kind of the historical foundation of the colonial matrix of power, right? So what is the colonial matrix of power? Briefly, Quijano gave us these 4 areas of experience. Quijano said, instead of saying that there was a second nomos, Quijano said, well, what happened in the 16th century is the emergence of a new pattern of power. He called it colonial pattern of power, patron in Spanish, colonial pattern, and in English we call it the colonial matrix of power because it's metaphorically like the field, the matrix. We are all in the matrix. There is no way out. You pick up, you want to have the red pill or the blue pill in the movie, right? So Quijano said this pattern, this matrix of power, control and manage 4 major areas of experience. One is the control and management of knowledge and subjectivity. 2 things here. Knowledge means institutional knowledge, because non-institutional knowledge is kind of marginalized. It's not kind of paying attention. So institutional knowledge could be from government, from bank, from universities, from all that kind of knowledge that control the subjectivity. Because, I mean, our subjectivity is not biological. Our subjectivity is manipulated by the television, by the iPod, by whatever kind of atmosphere, cultural atmosphere we live in when we are born. And we are educated, or school more than educated. So schooling have a lot in our formation, but also our parents and our family. But where are they coming from? Somehow they went, or they didn't go to school. They live in the country, etc. And well, what happened is that knowledge is not taken into account. So the control of knowledge is institutional control of knowledge. You know? Today, university and museum are the two major institutions of control of subjectivity, knowledge and subjectivity. The other area was the control and management of authority, which is government. In the 16th to 18th century with monarchy government, then in the 18th century came the nation state, which is the world today is living under this organization of nation state, about, I don't know, 198, something like that. There are a few monarchies in the Gulf. There are some few monarchies in Europe, but the nation state, like Spain and Holland and England, they have the monarchy in the house, but they are nation state. So the control and management of authority has been regulated, I would say, by the state and by the church. So during the monarchic period, 16th, 18th century, the church and the monarchy, they were together. Then came the nation state and marginalized the church. Marginalized by the churches there, we still have a papacy. And well, that's the kind of control of management of authorities like the monarchy. So the 18th century marginalized religion, Christianity, but still there. They marginalized the monarchy, but it's still there. But the nation state is what control us, no? And we have this problem today. You have a specific problem in Brazil now. I think we are in the process of somehow solving that problem in the United States. The third area of experience is control and management of economy. So in the 16th century, 17 was 18 mercantilism, then industrialism, and the finances all through, because I mean we know the Venetian and the Florence bankers and Genoveses first lend money to the monarchies to organize the trip to America, and then the Dutch, and then they lend it to the Dutch, etc., etc., etc. So the finances and the bank had been always there, kind of together with the law. And then we have technology, etc., etc. So, and the control and management of gender and sexuality. And that's what I was saying before. I mean, behind gender, the control of gender and sexuality and ethnicity, I forgot to put here, which is race, behind that is the question of the human and the question of humanity and a given concept of the human. But it so happened that the human is not something ontological. The human is a concept, and those who control knowledge control the concept of the human, who invented and who established that there are some people that are racially inferior and that are sexually inferior, right? And this kind of classification that we call the colonial difference means that from the perspective who control knowledge and control the concept of the human, there are people who are ontological deficient. So, for example, inferior races or inferior genders. And the people who are ontologically inferior are also epistemological deficient. They cannot really think like the human. And the human, who is the human? Well, who invented the concept of the human? In the Renaissance, they were male. All. They were kind of the monjas. They were not kind of in this discussion. They were in the convent. Even Sor Juana had problem with that. So they were male. They were rich or kind of well-placed male in the church, in the university, in the monarchy. They were white. They were Christian, and they were heterosexual. Or they say, because at that time it was difficult to say that you were homosexual. So the idea of the human has all these kind of features related to it. So those are the four major areas of experience that Quijano left to us. Now I will give you a more detailed, updated, let's say, version of the colonial matrix of power. In this, so everything I just said, you can see here, the domain of knowledge and understanding, the domain of governance, the domain of economy, which is living to work, right? Oikono, and the concept of the human. So all of these are interrelated. You cannot understand governance without understanding the relation with the human, knowledge, economy. Political economy and political theory are a question of knowledge, are not question of government. Maybe the government presuppose a concept of the state. But the state is also related to the economy and also related to the human, because lesser human do not participate in governance. Can participate in the governance, regional governance in the country, etc. In the IU, for example, in Bolivia, the IU are organized, but the state has the overall kind of view. The IU is a kind of local organization that is not followed by everybody and is not recognized by the state. You have to do it in spite of the state. In Haiti, the same thing happened. They call it LACU. The LACU is equivalent to the IU. And that is the kind of the true Haitian revolution. And you have the Kurds in Rojava. The Kurds have a lot of problem with the Turk and with the Syrian, but they have a kind of their own governance, but are not recognized by Turkey. They are not recognized by Syria. No? So you cannot. The point here is that you can concentrate in one, but you cannot just focus and detach from the other. So this is a kind of holistic model, pattern, matrix to understand what is going on. That is it's difficult to accept in modernity, because modernity has the expert, and the expert is somebody who knows a lot about one thing and is totally ignorant or mostly ignorant about the totality. Yeah? You have in medicine, you have the specialist. I mean, you have the specialist on the eye, or you have the specialist on the nervous system, or you have the specialist on the heart, etc. But you don't have kind of somebody, except in indigenous medicine, except in Chinese medicine, that you have somebody who can see, can look at the body in a kind of a holistic way. And if you have some kind of discomfort here or there, so they are looking at how this sign is related to the system of the body. Now, what Quijano didn't touch, and this is my addition, is that beyond the four areas of experience, or the four domains, I call that domains, there is something underneath. I don't know how to do the diagram, but imagine that this is underneath, no? That you don't see it. And that is the level of the enunciation that controls the four domain. that kind of the articulation, the constitution, articulation and constitution of the fourth domain, and epistemology is the kind of the reflection and the principle of the system of knowledge, right? So that is also kind of classificatory and tells you what counts as knowledge, what doesn't count. If you have to do a PhD, you will know that knowledge has to be regulated. You have to respond to regulation that you have in the discipline, right? So that's kind of the enunciation. You don't see the enunciation, but you see the manifestation of the enunciation. So what constitutes the enunciation? I give you three factors, elements that constitute the enunciation. Institution. So the institution that we see here, right? Universities, government, banks, etc. Well, there are not just a specific bank, the IMF, etc. The structure, the structure bank, the structure or the principle, there is an institution that lends money. Right? So that is the kind of institution that enunciation. So it's not a specific state, the state of Brazil or the state of France is the abstract concept of a state that regulates all the states that exist in the world. That is the level of institution. So it's not a specific university, the University of Sao Paulo, the University of Buenos Aires, or University of Rome. The university has became the institution of higher education, right? So that's what I mean. The enunciation, the pattern of the institution constitute one element of the enunciation. The second are the actors. Those institutions have to be ruled by someone. But those actors, I mean, the president in Brazil or the president in Argentina are specific actors, but there is already a pattern who can occupy those positions and what kind of training that person should have in order to kind of occupy those positions. Right? So we have institution, we have actors, and the third is languages. Everything in the colonial matrix of power, all the domain, had been controlled since 1500 by 6 modern imperial European languages. During the Renaissance were Italian because of the Renaissance, Spanish and Portuguese, and especially because of the imperial expansion of Spain and Portuguese, that also kind of had a kind of impact in knowledge. We have a school, the University of Salamanca, we have the University of Coimbra, who were kind of really powerful institution, also France, etc., and Bologna, who was the first, but Salamanca and Coimbra were the second and the third, I think. So, and then after the Enlightenment, the 3 imperial languages that displaces the first 3 were English, French, and German. And so happened that, well, until World War II, German and French were kind of very important, but now everything is done in English. So that is the kind of the underlying level of the enunciation, and that is what kind of the constitution. The constitution here is a concept. The constitution of the colonial matrix of power has been articulated like that since the 16th century. This is not fixed. Each area has a history. Changes, for example, a big change in the 18th century. Changed the kind of the economy, the concept of the human, the kind of the masculinity displaces The patriarch as a model, uh, knowledge, science, secular science, and philosophy displaces theological knowledge. The nation state displaces the monarchy, etc., etc. But so and then you can follow the history until today. Now, what is interesting here, I'm sorry that there are someone kind of blowing the leaves downstairs. Is that noise bothering you? Is the noise bothering you?
Yes, it seems like someone is vacuuming. Yeah.
Is yeah, there is somebody blowing leaves. But can you hear me? Can you understand me?
Yes, we can, and we'll try to tackle that. I think. Yeah. Okay. Please continue, Professor. We're going to find out what this noise is. We can hear
Uh,
you.
so the only thing is that I have to move away. Uh, let me. That was
But this noise is not coming from Durham, right?
no. It was under was below the window where I was talking. Uh,
Ah, there is someone there. Okay.
yes, there is someone
I
there.
thought the problem was in Brazil. Uh-huh.
No. It was okay. So I think it's better here, right? Yeah.
Yes, it's better now. Yes.
So did you understand what I said before?
Yes. Perhaps we could retake just a little bit, but we could. I could hear you well. I hope everybody could too.
Well, uh,
Perhaps just retake this last PowerPoint. Yes.
the question is, I don't know how to go back.
No,
Doesn't.
no, no, no. Not go back. Begin this
Well,
one.
I was talking, okay, I was talking about those four domains, right? I was explaining the enunciation. I don't know if this is very important that you understood what the enunciation meant. That you understand the question of institution, actors, and languages. Did you?
Yes.
Yes? Somebody has to respond because I don't know what to do.
Mr. Mignola, yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. So at the end, I say that this is the constitution of the colonial measure of power. And that is very important because in the process of constitution, simultaneously is the process of destitution. There is no one after the other. They are simultaneous. When the Spaniards come to the New World and institute and constitute the government in Peru or Mexico, they destitute simultaneously the governance of the Aztec or the Incas. When the British goes to India, they kind of little by little install their own kind of Raj, their own kind of government, and destitute the Mughal Sultanate. The same thing of the economy. The Spaniard and the Portuguese came, they kind of create a different kind of economy with exploitation of labor, appropriation of land, accumulation, and emerge what appear is named as mercantilism. So what they introduced there, because of the exploitation of labor and appropriation of land, is an excessive accumulation of excess. And what did they do with the excess? They reinvested to produce more because they were creating at that time a really global market. And what they did, they destituted the kind of the communal economies that existed among the Inca, the Maya, the Aztec, but also the Iroquois, the Turtle Island, all the kind of economy. They were not economy of accumulation, but that were kind of were economy of survival. It was not kind of becoming rich. So the point of this diagram is the constitution of each domain destitute, and look around and see how when somebody is constituted to destitute. So you have here that knowledge and governance destitute communal wisdom. Communal wisdom and knowing to live. And we say, well, there are kind of, so the Yatiris or the Tlamatinis, kind of they become brujos, witchmen, and they were the kind of the Aristotle or the Plato of the Incas and the Aztec. And so that is destituted because it comes the priests, it comes the men of letter, the kind of intellectual political theories, Machiavelli, etc., etc., etc. Governance. Governance destitute, establish a hierarchy, and destitute the kind of living in harmony, and that today we call summa causai, and in China called Tianxia, all under heaven. That in Africa they call Ubuntu. So all of that is kind of destituted because the nation state is put as a kind of so the same with the economy. We have an economy that was kind of an economy that was kind of working to live. That kind of economy is displaced by another economy that more and more you live to work. So the enslaved African were forced to do that, but more and more in a different way today. I mean, a lot of people live to work because they don't have enough money. They have to have one or two works in order to survive. No? And so comes the question of the human. So the human, as we said before, destitute other human being that do not fit the definition of the human. So that happened in each domain, but for that to happen in each domain, you have to kind of understand how the enunciation is kind of organizing, governing the destitution. Okay, so I didn't bring the clock, and so I was controlling my time, but now I lost it. So let's go to part 2, which is a kind of closing the talk. What is happening today, and this is what is important in the change of epoch, is that everything that was destituted began to be reconstituted and restituted. Right? So we see the most visible thing that to start with, the most visible is everything that we call the anti-races, the multiplication of organization of LGTB plus, the question, the organization to they had kind of religion dimensions, especially the Muslims that have been so much attacked at this time. So all this kind of organization, all this kind of organization is not just people who protest or complain. I think that there are people who are generating the new way of knowledge new, different knowledge, they're restituting the knowledge. They're kind of reconstituting the knowledge that have been destituted. The importance of the knowledge that in their languages, in their body, in their memories, in their kind of local history, that is coming from all over, right? So the question of the communal wisdom is coming back. The question of the humanness of all kind of animals, animal sapien, let's put it that way. But also the concept of, I didn't talk about, but the concept of nature, because the destitution of certain human being went together with the destitution of nature, in the sense that the magnificent diversity of the cosmos and the earth was reduced to one concept, nature. And nature could be controlled. And with the Industrial Revolution became natural resources. And today people talk about human resources. But also we have climate changes, but then we have a lot of organization, kind of decolonial ecology, that there are some organization. So all that goes into the reconstitution of what has been destitute. So the same thing for the economy. There are kind of coming back, reconstituting. Capitalism is global, but at the same time, there is a lot of people who began to realize that that doesn't make any sense. You have to reorganize the economy in where you work to live, and you don't live to work with somebody else who kind of enjoy and exploit your energy and kind of absorb all the kind of the energy and the pleasure of your body to produce more knowledge for the corporation, for the bank, for whatever. No? And the same in the question of, well, I already talked about government. So this is all coming back, and this is a tremendous, the importance in the change of epoch. That for 500 years, the colonial matrix of power was made, fabricated, controlled by Western countries. Now, after 2000, something began to change, and in general, this is what happened. In more particular way, now I'm going back. How is that? I see. Okay, I finish here, kind of being more specific of what I just said, that you can see. You can see here. So we have here the destitution. You see the arrow going. And we have here the reconstitution. So people who do not want anymore to be told what to do, that they are taking our or their destiny in our own hands. Okay, and now we go to the end, more specific about that. So the sign, more specifically, the sign of a change of epoch change are two, in two dimensions, two order, and that coexist. Wait a second, I have all these kind of funny things that come in my screen and blocking my view. So on the one hand, we have the interstate for people in the international relation. There is the change of epoch. One of the manifestation at this level is the closing of the interstate unipolar world order, and the explosion of the multipolar world order, or multipolarity. So you cannot talk here about transition, about one new order, as Schmidt was saying, but what we are seeing in this kind of multipolarity is coming to be more like the first nomos, the kind of multiplicity of a center. No one of them will control the other. So in a way, you can see that multipolarity is the reconstitution of the first nomos after the second nomos. Or is the reconstitution of the world order before the colonial matrix of power, having gone through the colonial matrix of power. Why? Because the colonial matrix of power corresponds with westernization of the world, right? But the colonial matrix of power is here, is with us. So the multipolarity doesn't question the colonial matrix of power, it questions who controls it, who manages it. And this, you can see, is one of the main, for me, point of contention between the United States and the European Union on the one hand, and China, Russia, and Iran in the other. So, China, Russia, and Iran are capitalists. They are not contesting capitalism. What they are contesting is politically, we don't want to follow what you told us or you want us to do. And in Latin America, we can see that in a very specific example. By the 70s and 80s, by the 70s, Latin America was supposed to develop. It didn't. But what happened with the Asian tiger? They did. And how come they did? How come Hong Kong and Taiwan and Korea and Indonesia and Malaysia, why those developed? Because they didn't follow the rule of the IMF and the World Bank. That is the de-Westernization. De-Westernization is, give me capitalism, but I manage it, I control it. Well, will be negotiation, etc. So that is de-Westernization. De-Westernization began to really take form by the first decade of the 20th century, and the BRICS was one of the first kind of visible signs of what is coming. So to de-Westernization, the response was re-Westernization. And re-Westernization was the Obama politics, because he realized that with Cheney and Bush, United States lost hegemony. And so what Obama started was a kind of counter-reformation. It was like the Catholicism after Lutero. So Lutero introduced the Reformation, and the Christian, the Catholic, kind of responded with a counter-reformation. So now the re-Westernization is playing defense, and this is very important epoch of change of epoch. There is no one country guiding, but it's multipolarity, because there is a lot of countries that are kind of moving in that kind of direction. And the Belt and Road Initiative of China is another important factor in this de-Westernization and also kind of multipolarity, because China is not interested in being like United States or Europe controlling. So that is Jinping rhetoric of win-win situation. The common, what is the sentence that he said is the common destiny of humankind, or something like that. But China don't have that tradition that have Christianity and that have Europe and that have United States, that is, we are the best, we want to control. That is not in the 3,000 years of China. So to see that, to say that China want to take the imperial role of United States, I don't see it like that. I don't see it for two reasons. One, I don't think that China is interested in that. And second, even if they are, they cannot do it, because United States will keep being strong, and Europe will keep being strong. So that is the question of the coexistence and the question of multipolarity. So the Europe and United States that kind of control the unipolar polar world, well, they have to kind of accept at some point that their unipolarity is part of the multipolar. Well, we saw it in the last failure of United States to trying to convince the UN Security Council to increase the debt in Iran. So it ended up that the United States was just by himself, because the other Canada and England, I think, is in the Security Council. They voted with China and Russia. And then we have decolonization in this kind of frame. Decolonization during the Cold War. So decolonization during the Cold War was neither capitalism nor communism, but decolonization. And decolonization was the idea of having their own nation state governed by the native or the indigenous. So the same thing that happened in South America since the 19th century, with one difference. Number one, that the 19th century was, the world order were very different to the second half of the 20th century. That is a significant difference. There was no communism at that point. So the nation state was formed just kind of independence from Spain and Portugal, mainly. And England, in the case of United States. But the main difference is that in the Americas, the nation state were kind of controlled, but by the immigrant. I mean, the Creole, well, not the immigrant. Yeah, the immigrant. Yeah. The Creole and the mestizos, because the Creole were son and daughter of the initial settler. All right, the Creole, we know, were the kind of of European descent, of pure blood, of pure kind of Spanish or Portuguese blood. While the mestizo was a kind of, we know, mixture of Spanish. I don't know if you do the same in Brazil, but it's a mixture of Spanish blood and indigenous blood. But they may have mestizos and mestizas may have a Spanish mixture of blood, but mentality is European. It's a very few cases, a mestizo mestiza that will kind of lean toward the kind of the generally the mother language and the mother culture. So the same for mulattoes. So the mulattoes and mulattas didn't, except in Haiti, but in the South and North and Central America, the independence, the nation state, were controlled by the people of European descent, Creole or mestizos. So Haiti was the only case in which the state was created by the descendant of African. That was while in Asia, in Africa, the nation state was always created and controlled by the natives. There were no settlers dominating those countries, except Australia, of course. Australia and New Zealand are specific cases, but I mean, inland Asia, inland Africa, there were not settlers since the 16th century that in Latin America could control the creation of the new state. Okay, so that let's go to the B. So the question now is what happened to decolonization and decoloniality after the end of the Cold War, because by the end of the Cold War was very clear that the state was no longer a solution, was a big problem. And we are seeing it now. There are different cases, but as Fanon already saw it in the 60s, in Algeria and in part of Africa, that the nation state will be taken up by a minority of the country, and the rest of the country will be in the same or worse condition that they were under the imperial settlers. So by the 90s, Quijano already saw that the state is no longer a solution. Is there, we have to deal with it, but we cannot democratize the state or we cannot decolonize the state. The state that we saw in the colonial metric of power is already ingrained, embedded in a major structure that you cannot decolonize or democratize that because the structure is too big. So the question is, what is decoloniality now? So if multipolarity, I mean, if the the closing of the war, the kind of explosion, it gives multipolarity. The epistemic explosion gives pluriversality. So the explosion here is the explosion of unipolarity toward multipolarity. The explosion here is universality, pluriversality. And that happened, as I show you in the last diagram, and that happened not in the state, but in the political society. And the political society is us. Each of us, wherever we are, if we believe in this, what can we do at the university or a kind of the peasant way or the Zapatistas or whatever? What can we do in the place we are to move toward kind of epistemic and aesthetic pluriversality, meaning the linking from epistemic and aesthetic and kind of moving into the nociological and aesthetic reconstitution, meaning you need a different kind of way of understanding yourself, society, Earth, the cosmos, the planet, to become a different person, to feel difference. So that is, this is a question of aesthetic reconstitution. Reconstituting ourselves as a decolonial subject, because you cannot decolonize anything if you are still a modern subject. That will be that will be like you want to transform something outside of you, but you will remain with the privilege or the kind of subjectivity of modernity. So here I give you example of how to think, especially where this is happening. Where this is happening. I already mentioned some. You have the anti-racist, anti-sexist. The statues are taken down, and that is very important because taking down the statue is not just a piece of material, it's a symbol, but behind the symbol is a knowledge. And it means that you don't believe anymore in the knowledge that sustained that statue, not just a pedestal that sustained the statue. The knowledge that sustained the statue. One of the points that were made during the in the United States after George Floyd killing and the statues being taken down. So one in a blog or some kind of publication in the web, they said, well, this is good to take the founding father statue down, but hey, the founding father wrote the Constitution. So if we take the founding father down and we leave the Constitution untouched, and the Constitution is knowledge, right? So that is why it's important, the Constitution in Bolivia and Peru. I mean, for several reasons. Plurinational state is a tremendous. It's not that the state, the government will do it, but it's already there. The change is already there. The modern epistemology, political theory is one state, one nation. In Bolivia and Ecuador, they say, well, here it doesn't work. It has to be a plurinational state. Summa causa is already in the Constitution. The right of Pachamama are already in the Constitution. And that is coming because of what we call social movement. So it's not just protesting and being anti and opposing. The question is to re-exist. And in order to re-exist, you have to know, you have to reconstitute the knowledge that has been destituted, and you have to reconstitute yourself as a decolonial subject and not the kind of served of modernity and kind of depend on postmodernity and French intellectual and kind of European tradition of knowledge, etc. etc. That is, we cannot ignore that, but at the same time, we are moving away. And so that is another issue. And the final issue is that both de-Westernization and decoloniality presuppose border dwelling and border thinking as a different way of doing it, because in the de-Westernization is the state, and the state politic and political economy, etc. And for us, these kind of issues happen in a different order. So I finish here and I move upstairs to have the conversation. The blower was very good.
Okay, Professor.
So I'm moving. I am moving to my desk.
Okay.
So I will move into my desk and I stop the.
Okay. Have you arrived?
Yeah,
We can't see you yet.
Wait a second.
Okay.
Start video. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much. We are trying to open the microphone so we can give you a great wave of applause, but I don't know if they're open yet, but I'm representing everybody. Yes. There they are. And Professor, are you drinking a mate?
Sorry?
Is this a mate?
No, this is no, it's a kind of mixed agridulce juice.
Okay. And we have already some questions here.
I wanna say something I forgot. You see that behind me, that hanging?
Yes, we can see it.
So this is an antique. I bought it in the Art Craft in Sao Paulo in 1988 or 89.
Oh.
So it's 40 years, no, 30 years old.
It looks new. So it's Brazil's in your house.
And it's Art Craft. It was in the market in the square.
It's beautiful. Yes.
On a Sunday.
Okay, Professor. The first question is from Ana Lacerda, and she's asking the following. Taking as an example the constitution of the Bolivian plurinational state, do you believe that the decolonization of the state as an institution is possible, considering that its origins are European? What are the challenges? Do you understand?
Oh,
me?
Okay. So I'm trying to be brief so that we have time for more questions. But if I don't say what I say is not satisfactory, we can keep on talking. But I said that the state cannot be decolonized and cannot be democratized for different reasons. Cannot be democratized because the state is connected to capitalism, and you cannot have democracy with capitalism, with a capitalist economy. you can, you can vote. As a friend of mine said, I mean, voting is that you are selecting who will be your next oppressor. So there is democracy doesn't is a good idea, but the only thing you can do is to vote, and of course, in United States today, it's much better what is coming, Biden and Kamala, but the system will be the same. So, will be more diplomatic, will be more opening in United States in terms of race and gender, and all that is important. But inequality will persist, and conflict will persist, etc., etc., and cannot be decolonized, even if under Morales and Linera, there was a secretary of decolonization. Doesn't make any sense, because decolonization means to have a different kind of organization that is not embedded in the colonial matrix of power. So there are two examples here: the Zapatistas and Rojava. Those are the colonial organization. Those are the colonial. It doesn't matter if they call themselves the colonial or not. The colonials in the sense that they link from the colonial matrix of power and form their own government. So I mentioned also the case of Haiti, the Lakou, the sovereign people in the Lakou, they organize themselves, but with their back to the state. So they are kind of decolonial organization. So there is a group in Peru, they are having conversation on autonomy and auto-governance. And there is a lot of things going on in small communities in Latin America where people realize that they have to have their own form of organization. So that is on the point of democratizing and decolonizing the state. The question of the plurinational, I think there are two issues here. I think it's very important conceptually that people began to realize that the nation state that is European, when you take it to the colonies, well, in Europe, the population were 90% homogeneous, right? So there were Jews and there were Roma, etc., but you can say there was one nation. But when you go to Bolivia, when you go to India, when you go to Africa, you have many nations. So what happened is you have one state for many nations, and there is one ethnicity that controls the state. So in the case of Bolivia, that ethnicity, in the case of Ecuador, that was the kind of mestizos Creole. So that is, but the idea of the plurinationality is already very important because it's a reorientation of the form of governance that is already having an impact not in the state, but in the people, in this political society. So that is so to have a plurinational state means not a state, to have a plurinational governance means to have an organization in which every ethnicity have its own organization and respect the other. But that cannot be in the current state, because the current state is integrated to the interstate relation, and you cannot have a state today independent of the international relation, especially what they call underdeveloped or dependent states. So that is the problem we are facing. Has many, but I think we have to be, on the one hand, support certain kind of state. I mean, I'm supporting Fernandez in Argentina, but at the same time, that is not enough. We have to keep on thinking what other possible way of life are independent of the state.
Okay. We also
I
have
am
another
reading one
question.
here. Wait a second. I think I'm reading one here. Uh, yeah, I am reading the one from Raquel.
Okay.
Yeah, the the relationship between nociology and ecology of knowledge and Chishi. I think in this case, the most important thing here is not just to compare the meaning, the significado of the concept, but look at the enunciation. That is fundamental. Not just the person, but what is the kind of the frame uh, behind that person. So nociolo, I mean, I think that the three concepts are different in kind of in relation to the enunciation, but I think that the three concepts are kind of uh, walking in the same direction. So trying to get out of this kind of universality of Western epistemology. So that is Kusikansky come from her own kind of history in Bolivia, which I mean, it kind of I think is I mean, I don't think I don't know if she's indigenous or not, but very working very close to indigenous people. I work in Bolivian with Fernando Guanacuni Mamani, who is Aymara, and who wrote this fantastic book, Buen Vivir Suma Causai, which is a kind of reconstitution of Aymara. Aymara way of knowing, Aymara conceptualization, etc. So nociology, I introduced nociology within taking a concept that has been destituted, marginalized by Western epistemology. There is a long concept, a long tradition of the, nociology, but at some point nociology meant theory of knowledge. But I use it because of Valentine Mudimbe, an African intellectual from Congo. He was asked in the 80s to write a report about African philosophy. And when he started writing such a report, he said, "But how can I, how can I, how can I, how can I write this report? Because Africa, the African wisdom, is not what the European call philosophy. So he needed another term to talk about African wisdom, and so he kind of recovered nociology." So I come from this kind of genealogy of the concept that I bring into the conceptual matrix of power. Neither Kusikansky and Boaventura, they have a different frame. They don't work with this frame. And Boaventura ecology of knowledge, yeah, is I think it's an easy metaphor. I mean, the kind of you talk about the ecology in general and then the ecology of knowledge, but we call that pluriversality. For us, it's pluriversality, the reconstitution, the processes of reconstitution of the knowledge that has been destitute. So, in the one hand, yes, there are parallels, but on the other hand, there are kind of distinctive features in each genealogy of thought that has to be do also with the way we feel, we sense the world. So we have to kind of abandon this modern idea that we just work with concepts and we don't ask about the enunciation. So we began to spin the spin and kind of write the comparison about this concept and this concept, and we don't ask who is saying what, where, and how. So that is the starting point. For the three examples you give, ask yourself who is saying that, why is saying that, where is saying that, what for. And there are more concepts. These are three, but there are more concepts. Let me see. Despite the move toward multipolarity and the decline of the US hegemony, we are witnessing the other actors, China, willing to keep the current international in place. Some are taking, for instance, talking about globalization with Chinese characteristic. At the same time, there is a resurgence of radical right, xenophobic and racist political parties and movements. How can we interpret this from a decolonial perspective? Could we understand it as an attempt to defend the existence, coloniality of power knowledge in spite of the later change of hand in terms of the main global power? Could this present an expansion of pluriversality? What? Many things here.
Prevent an expansion.
Present, yeah.
Prevent.
Yeah. Present an expansion. Right?
No, it would be prevent. Prevent.
Oh, prevent. I lost it. Oh, prevent. Oh, here. Prevent expansion. Of course. I mean, okay. I said that the China is disputing the control and management of the colonial measure of power. See, China is not disputing the colonial measure of power. They're disputing who controls it. And that is what opened to pluriversality. So all this kind of sentence, socialist with the Chinese characteristic, the other one you mentioned here, yeah, globalization with Chinese characteristic, that is telling you very clearly. Yeah, we are doing socialist, but in our way. We are capitalists and they are socialists. So what? For you, capitalism and socialism cannot go together. Well, for us, it can. No? For you, democracy and capitalism goes together, but for us, no. So globalization with Chinese characteristic means we support. I mean, we are globalizer, but we are not neoliberal. That is That is crucial. Because the goal of neoliberalism was to kind of homogenize the world. And that's kind of the re-Westernization is that. So you see that. Huh? So this is a decolonial interpretation of what is going on today. It's a dispute over the control of the colonial measure of power that happened at different levels. Not just technology and kind of commerce and all that, but China and Russia and Turkey and Iran, they are already talking about civilizational state. And that is very, very important because when you look at, let's say, China, why China would be a nation state? They're a civilization. Because of the complexity of the Opium War and then the kind of the end of the dynasty, they move into organizing China as a nation state. But now they began to realize that, hey, no, we are a civilization. Why would be a kind of a nation state within a civilization that is governed by Western civilization? No, thank you. The same Turkey. I mean, Erdogan is kind of recovering the tradition of Suleiman the Magnificent, not the Ataturk who created. So same with Iran, etc. So the question here is the dispute of the control of the colonial, the control of the colonial major power. Neither of them are interested in pluriversality. Of course, they are preventing, and that pluriversality is the task of us, the political society. And we have to understand that now, and for many decades, 4, 5, 6, 7, perhaps the 21st century, we will be in a world order in which westernization, I mean, re-westernization, de-westernization, and decoloniality will coexist. That is I think is unavoidable. Um, so the fundamentally, I said it already, we have to think in terms of coexistence, not in terms of who will be the next. How can we be the pluriversality, be the best, and be the world, the kind of universal way of no. The three possibilities coexist. So let's go to the next question. Muchísimas gracias. There is another question.
I will send you the next question, Professor.
Which one?
The one I just sent you, Hugo Felix. I can read it.
Rafael. Hugo Felix.
Felix
Okay.
from YouTube, yeah?
Yeah, I got it. Is it possible to convince the other colonizer, the one who owns epistemological and coercive power, to not use them against a decolonizer subject who rejects the colonial government peacefully? If it is, how? Well, here is where the question of subjectivity is very important, because it's not just the subjectivity of the colonizer, it is subjectivity of the colonized, the colonizer and the colonized. So the colonial measure of power is not just controlling the victims, it's controlling the manager, because the manager has to spend all their life to kind of defend their territory. And you see it now in the question of building walls in the countries, stopping immigration, stopping refugees. In Venezuela and I think in Rio, in Sao Paulo, people are putting fences with glasses on top of the walls. So we got in a situation in which the one who control knowledge, who control the economy, are in a state of fear. So those people you cannot convince. Forget it. I always remember here something that Darwin said at the end of The Origin of the Species. He knew that what he was saying was kind of not convenient for many people, especially creationists, especially Christian. And he said, I am not writing this book to convince my contemporaries. I am writing the book for the future generation. And I think that this is what we have to think. I mean, don't expect that we, with what kind of tools, will transform the world in kind of 2021. I think what we have to be this kind of consciousness that what we are doing now is how you say siembra. How you say siembra, sembrar, to put greens on the on earth.
To put greens on earth, like to in agriculture, do you mean?
Yeah, when you put greens, how you say that in English? We say sembrar in Espanol.
Okay, in Portuguese, semear. Yeah.
Okay.
I forgot in English too.
Well, right. So that's we have to put that semillas to put semillas for the future generation. We cannot convince. And if you look around, there are significant changes already taking place in people consciousness, in people awareness. After George Floyd, there is amazing the amount of white people in the United States that you listen in the radio that began to realize what racism is. They were not paying attention to racism. They are kind of black people, they are killing black people. But now there's a kind of knowledge being articulated and disseminated in journalism, in the web, etc. People talking in the radio, in kind of radio talk. So we have to think pluriversality in those terms, putting semillas. You know, semillas come from semen, and semen is the semilla that generates. So that is what we have to see the political society. The political society is generating a different way of living. I don't know what will happen with the westernization and re-westernization. We have to be attentive, but at the same time, we have our own life, communal life, knowledge, living together, reconstitute love and respect for each other, recovering, restituting, being together, working together, coalition instead of competition and hate, which we are seeing in Brazil, but also in the opposition in Argentina and in the United States. Trump contributed a lot to that. So we cannot play that game. We have to be attentive, but we have to build something else. I mean, nociologically and aesthetically. Okay.
You're seeing the new question, Professor?
I see Gustavo Alves.
Yes.
As you said, Rojava is a great example of decolonization of the state. However, their autonomy is heavily dependent on the fragility of the Syrian state during the civil war. How can the decolonization of the state may be perdurable, considering the state is still the main form of political organization? How can we overcome this logic? Just keep on going. Of course, the Zapatistas have the same problem. You cannot expect. You have to understand now, in the kind of multipolarity, that Syria is not just the state of Syria. Syria is at the crossroad of westernization and de-westernization. So United States start trying to kind of knock al-Assad down to have a change of government, and Russia and China said, no, thank you, but no, that is not convenient for us. So if al-Assad is still there, is in spite of Turkey, is because China, Russia, and Iran are supporting it. So Rojava has to, they have to kind of figure out day after day after day how to do it. The Zapatistas have been doing that for 30 years almost, right? Venezuela is another case. I mean, why Maduro is still in power if United States is just next door? Because China and Russia have a lot of investment in there. Huh? So you have Syria is not just Syria is very important also, like Ukraine, because what Ukraine and Syria, what the United States was trying to do is to have two posts toward the Central Asia, because Central Asia is the chicken of the golden egg. But that is no longer possible, because Central Asia now is controlled by China, Russia, look at the map, Iran, and Turkey. There is a lot of mess in the Middle East, but Central Asia and Turkey have a lot of interest there because the Caucasus was always a kind of under the Ottoman Sultanate. And so Rojava and the Zapatistas, they're kind of a small, important initiative uh, I won't say decolonizing the state. I think that they're a decolonial way of governance. That's what they are. They are no longer kind of uh, trying to replicate the state independently. No, they are doing something else. So the Zapatistas, the principle, Zapatista principle to govern and obey at the same time is one. It's a political theory of their organization. I don't know the detail of the Rojava, but I know that they're very similar. Okay. So that how can you overcome that logic? Just keep on doing it. Keep on doing it. You cannot stop the big state and the big bank and the IMF and all these kind of things to play the game. We are too small for that. We can protest. That's important. So we can force some kind of changes in the state. For example, in Chile, Chile was very important. They forced a change of the constitution, something that Bolivia and Ecuador. In Colombia, there's something very important there. So all of that is very important within the kind of the dissent attitude and demanding from the state things that the state is abusing. But on the other hand, we cannot put all the eggs there. We have to kind of simultaneously build a different thing. Otherwise, we are just kind of consumed by consumerism, but also consumed by the politics of the state. So that is a way of overcoming. We have to overcome, we have to delink from that kind of slavery that is forcing us. ¿Qué podemos esperar de los movimientos y resistencias sociales como fuerza de cambio? Precisely what I just said. I think that all these kind of manifestations that we have been, have been Bolivia. Bolivia has tremendous. Bolivia show how ridiculous was the coup d'etat and how ridiculous was the Inter-American Almagro or all these kind of people who said that was fraud. How ridiculous, and how they did it. They did it well on the one hand because of the 14 years of Evo governance. He changed a lot of things. There was a lot of problem, but at the same time. So what happened now is that the indigenous people, the Aymaras, Quechuas, basically Aymaras, reorganize themselves. And I know Fernando Guanacuni Mamani, I mentioned before, he was a very active organizing community. And I know that Choquehuanca, I think that, there is a rumor that the Choquehuanca and Fernando have a big role in kind of reorganizing the Ayus and the Aymaras community. And there is a 60% Aymara population. So we have a state. And that is good because there is no kind of Janine or the guy from Santa Cruz or Carlos Mesa, but they see the state, and we have to be attentive because it's an Aymara state. It's Aymara governance, but the Aymara governance is linked to the kind of the forces of de-Westernization and re-Westernization. So United States is more and more interested in rebuilding the kind of connection with Latin America. So they have countries like Colombia. Colombia is like Israel or like Japan. Colombia is the kind of the headquarters of United States in Latin America. So you have Peru, and now it's very interesting too what is going on in Peru. You have Chile. United States have this kind of allies. So I don't think that Arce y Choquehuanca won't be ally of United States. Fernandez in Argentina is not ally of United States. They're kind of becoming, the best thing they can do now is independent. Neither one nor the other, both. I will have relation with China, and I will have relation with you, according. And Guzman in Argentina has been saying that very clearly, the Secretary of Economy. First is us. We will just think what we need, and then we will negotiate with you. But don't tell us, not China, but the IMF or the White House, don't tell us what we have to do. We know what we have to do. We have limitation because we have the money and we have the debt, but we have China and Russia who are investing here. So the best thing that that the state can do, and that would be a kind of de-Westernization, because it will follow the politics of de-Westernization without stopping negotiation with the United States. And I think it's a big change here in relation to Chavez, in relation to Chavez, in relation to Correa, some Kirchner that were very antagonistic. I think that this government is more a kind of a Lula and Rousseff type. That Lula and Rousseff were very kind of diplomatic in that. They were obviously confronting United States, but they were not kind of insulting and attacking and kind of doing bravados like Chavez. So perhaps we can see that we can think that the legacy of Lula, the kind of what kind of government we can do, may be that we have a continuation of Lula in the form of government we have in Argentina and we have in Bolivia now. And that's good. I mean, it's not ideal, but you cannot think ideal solution now. We have to keep on doing our decolonial work and supporting the states that we support like this, and keep a kind of confronting Bolsonaros and the other Bolsonaros in other parts of Latin America. Well,
Hey, Professor, thank you. We still have 10 minutes
okay.
until yet we have no new questions. So while you were presenting, I was thinking perhaps that we could clarify a potential conceptual confusion, because we learned in our discipline in international relations to call polarity in the realist tradition, is a theory, yeah, in international relations, to call polarity, for example, the polarity between the US and the Soviet Union in the Cold War. This would be a bipolarity, yes? But I think what you're speaking about when you say unipolarity is unicentrism, yeah?
Right.
And multipolarity is multicentrism. So is it possible to make this distinction?
Thank you for that question, because there is an important thing there that I didn't address and clarify. So the unipolarity, at some point after 1945, become bipolarity, but that bipolarity is within Western conceptualization. So, liberal capitalism and state communism, they are brothers of enlightenment. So that is the bipolar, but who won? The winner was the guy who invented capitalism, the liberals, and the Christian, and the Western Christian, because the other are the Orthodox Eastern Christian. And who won? And so it was a short chapter of bipolarity, but unipolarity came back. Came back with the illusion that was modernity all the way down, that was the end of history, and that was, I have it in my PowerPoint, and that's what the West didn't understand. Kind of, they were driven by their own kind of blindness. Because the collapse of the Soviet Union was at the same time the closing of the cycle of unipolarity, bipolarity within the Western the bubble, and opening up to multipolarity. And what is the difference between multipolarity and bipolarity beyond what I said? That you see, what Stalin did and what Mao did. Uh, Stalin kind of marginalized the Orthodox Church and kind of reject tradition because he want to be modern. Mao rejected Confucius and Mencius. Now, when Putin come back and Deng Xiaoping kind of began the process, tradition is coming back. Putin is bringing the Orthodox Church back to the state. Jinping, but before Jinping, Confucius and Mencius were coming back. And people say, well, how can you mix Confucius and Mencius and socialists and Mao? Well, I think that you can do it because basically Chinese civilization is based on many things, but in this kind of thinker, Laetius, Mencius, like Western civilization is based on Plato, Aristotle, St. Thomas, St. Augustine. So that is possible because they are integrating Western elements into their own conception. It's like the indigenous people in Latin America. The indigenous people have never been Christian Catholic, even if they have saints in their houses. They have saints in the houses, but they are guided by kind of the Popol Vuh, the Maya cosmology, the Inca cosmology, etc. So they integrate, but they don't lose the grounded normativity that is there for years. Tradition, I mean, generation after generation after generation, the languages, the memory, the food, the practice of living. So that is multipolarity is bringing that back at the level of the state. So it's more clear in Erdogan is going back to the Ottoman, not to Ataturk, who created the nation states. Iran, they are Muslims. They have their own thinker. They have their own language. They have the Persian tradition, the Persian literature. Al-Ghazali is a kind of great thinker. So that is the difference between multipolarity and bipolarity that was within the Western bubble. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor. Yeah, polarity inside Eurocentrism is not what you're speaking about, yes?
Well, say that again. Eurocentrism is what?
Polarity inside Eurocentrism
Yeah,
is
yeah,
not
yeah,
what
yeah,
we're
yeah.
talking about.
Exactly. In that sense, Mao was a little bit different. Why? Because Mao was incorporated Marxist, but China has been always something totally different from the West. But not this, Russia. Since Peter the Great and Catherine the Great, 17th, 18th century, Russia want to be modern and Western. And that created St. Petersburg to be the kind of the window to Europe. So you said it very well. Bipolarity is within Eurocentrism. And multipolarity breaks, is the explosion. Is the explosion because all the kind of the memories that are being reconstituted because people don't want to think and live like a European. It's good for the European to live and think how they do. It's not a question of prohibiting them to do that. The question we are asking is, please be a little bit more modest and keep your way of living and thinking for yourself, but not trying to kind of tell other people what to do, what to think, what to dress, what, etc. So if you have veil or don't have veil, I mean, that's not your business. So, and that is in race and sexuality also. I mean, let people just be like they are and have the sexual preference they want. I mean, who are you to kind of establish a norm? So that is the kind of the pluriversal agenda that we are trying to advance. And this is a question of knowledge. You have to produce knowledge, produce argument, disseminate knowledge. And people began to change their own subjectivity. They start not feeling inferior or inadequate because they are not adequate to Eurocentrism. And they began to empower themselves and to feel like they can live the way they please, respecting the other, because this is another important thing. Individualism is out. Like in pluriversality, individualism and the big ego is out. Pluriversality means the communal. Ubuntu means I am because you are. I cannot be by myself. So the communal is, this is, for you it's very important this. I mean, we have to make here a distinction between the society and the communal. The society is organization of human beings. Some less human, other more human, but human being. The communal is the organization, the living, the relation of all the living. With earth, with the river, with the mountain, with the sun, with the window, with the wind, with the moon. That is the communal. And that we are learning that from indigenous way of knowing and way of living. I think they are telling us that we are, that the television is telling us that the time is over, right?
Professor, thank you again for your presentation and all for the questions. And I want to thank everybody that was here with us, listening, making questions. I'm very grateful. It was great to hear all the conversation.
Okay. Thank you for all
Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you, all of you, for sitting there for 2 hours. Bye-bye.
I think the organizer wants to close the meeting. Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Do you have any information about the people who were watching in live stream?
Could you repeat, Professor?
Yeah. Do you have information about the people who were in live stream?
Yes. Professor, on YouTube we had at about 50 people at one moment. Now it is a bit less, but in the middle of the lecture we had 50 people on live stream on YouTube.
Okay. All right. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Mignolo.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mignolo. Obrigado, Fábio, pela gentil mediação, e convidamos a todos para a nossa palestra de amanhã às 10 da manhã, que é os desencontros entre as grandes potências e os principais impactos no sistema internacional, amanhã às 10 da manhã. Muito obrigado a todos. Once again, thank you, Mr. Mignolo. It was an outstanding lecture. Muito obrigado, Fábio. Boa noite a todos. Good night.
Boa noite.